First, Syria. Is the regime there collapsing? The country's prime minister, who defected last week, claims that it is. And a major blast in the center of Damascus earlier today just increases the mayhem. Earlier, I spoke to Sam Dagher in Lebanon and asked him if Riyad Hijab, the former prime minister, is right.
Well, I think Mr. Hijab is certainly reflecting the view of many Syrians, and certainly we've seen support for the regime eroding significantly since the start of the conflict almost 18 months ago. I say conflict, obviously we all know it started as an uprising against the regime that quickly turned into effectively a bloody insurgency. But by the same token, this is a regime that has been closing in on itself, relying more and more on hardcore loyalists, and a regime and these loyalists are willing to fight tooth and nail to hang on to power, even if it means plunging the country into what's effectively a sectarian civil war, and that's what most people describe the situation in Syria at the moment.
So basically, I mean, he said that the regime was collapsing morally, financially, and economically. Is that really the case, do you think, Sam?
Well, I think the PM is reflecting certainly the view of many Syrians, and we have certainly seen support for this regime eroding significantly since the start of the conflict about 18 months ago. This is obviously a conflict that started as an uprising, as a series of protests against the regime that was quickly turned into a bloody crackdown by the regime and then a full-on insurgency against the regime. And but by the same token, I mean, this is a regime that has been closing in on itself, relying more and more on hardcore loyalists who belong to the country's minority Alawite sect. This is the same sect to which President Assad's family belongs, and more relying on these loyalists to carry out the bloody crackdown, and basically, effectively, everyone else, namely those who belong to the country's Sunni majority, are the ones now fueling the rebellion. And Mr. Hijab, belongs to the Sunni majority, and so do most of the people who have defected so far from the regime.
I mean, it is interesting, Sam, that the former prime minister was the highest-ranking civilian to obviously defect, but he wasn't part of Bashar al-Assad's inner circle. But as I said, do you think also that the sanctions are working at all?
Definitely. I think more and more the regime, Syria is becoming a pariah state. We have the sanctions against the symbols and pillars of this regime, and also the sanctions against the government itself in terms of the sale and marketing of its oil and other sort of banking activities and so on and so forth. But at the same time, this is a Syrian regime that's still supported by major countries like Russia, China, Iran. Obviously, Iran is also under the target of sanctions, but still, and also some Latin American states like Venezuela. There's also Iraq to some degree. So it's still able to find support in some quarters.
Sam, and finally, there was an explosion in Damascus this morning. I mean, what's the latest reports on what's happening there?
Sure. Well, basically what we're hearing from state media and Syrian officials who've spoken on state media that some sort of an explosive device attached to a fuel tanker truck exploded in a parking lot across from the hotel in central Damascus that's being used as the residence and headquarters of the UN observer mission. And this mission's mandate is actually coming to an end on Sunday.
So we'll just have to wait and see exactly who is responsible, I guess. Sam, thank you very much. It's very kind for you for joining us from Lebanon.
My pleasure. Thank you.